Right now, if you smoke, or you know someone who does, you probably think of it as a modern vice. Something your grandparents picked up in the 20th century, sold in a shiny pack. Bad for you, and everyone knows it. You think somebody invented this. You think it's ours. But humans were doing this tens of thousands of years before the first factory, the first ad, the first cough. And they weren't doing it for fun. They were doing it to survive. Burning plants to fight off swarms of insects that could kill them in a night. Burning plants to numb a wound that would otherwise rot. Burning plants to slip into a state of mind they had no word for, but chased anyway, again and again, because something inside them was already built to want it. Insects. Infection. The smoke that got into their own heads. And that fourth thing, the hunger that pulled them back toward the fire, long before anyone called it a habit. 4 reasons ancient humans burned plants and breathed the smoke on purpose. And by the end, you'll understand exactly why that last one still has a grip on you today. Let's start with the one you'd feel first. You're standing near a fire, 40,000 BC. The sun is gone, and you are not alone. The air around your skin is alive. Mosquitoes, midges, flies that lay eggs in open cuts while you sleep. In the modern world, you'd reach for a spray and forget about it. Out here, that cloud of insects isn't annoying. It's a death sentence with wings. Here's the catch. To survive the night, you can't outrun them, you can't swat them, and you can't stay awake forever. So what's left? The fire. But not the flame. The smoke. Somewhere along the line, an ancestor noticed that when the wind pushed thick smoke across the camp, the biting stopped. The insects fled it. So people started feeding the fire on purpose. Green leaves, damp plants, resins, anything that choked out a heavy, clinging cloud that hung over the sleeping bodies like a shield. At Sibudu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found something remarkably. Layers of burned aromatic plants, including a species with natural insect-repelling compounds, laid down as bedding roughly 77,000 years ago. 77,000 years. These people weren't just sleeping near smoke by accident. They were engineering it, burning specific plants to poison the air just enough to keep the killers out. That's the picture on your screen right now. One figure holding a burning bundle close to the face, head tilted back, breathing it in while the others watch. Not for pleasure, for protection. So they built a private bubble of smoke and survived the night. But smoke that keeps insects out of your skin can't do a thing about what's already inside it. And that was the next way the dark tried to kill you. You cut your hand 2 days ago, skinning something or slipping on wet rock. It doesn't matter how. In your world, that's a bandage and an afternoon. In this one, the edges of that cut have gone hot and red, and the redness is crawling up your arm. 40%. That's roughly how many of these ancestors, by some estimates, never made it out of childhood. And infection was one of the quietest killers on that list. Here's the part rarely mentioned. Ancient humans had no idea bacteria existed. No microscope, no germ theory, nothing. So how do you fight an enemy you can't see, can't name, and can't imagine? You burn the right plants and you hold the wound in the smoke. Because it turns out many of the plants people were already burning, for insects, for warmth, carried antimicrobial compounds. The smoke of certain resins and herbs actually slowed the rot, and this wasn't a lucky guess repeated once. Ötzi, the 5,300-year-old Iceman found frozen in the Alps, was carrying 2 pieces of birch fungus, a species with documented antibacterial and antiparasitic properties, strung on leather cords clearly kept for a reason. He was walking around with a medicine kit. Sit with that for a moment. 5,000 years ago, a man in the mountains understood something his species couldn't explain for another 5,000, that certain plants, and the smoke they gave off, could hold back a death you couldn't see coming. They didn't have the word medicine. They had the result. So now the wound is treated and the insects are held back. You've bought yourself the night, but the smoke was doing something else to these people. Something the plants themselves were doing to their minds. And that's where this story stops being about survival and starts getting strange. Every single night, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans sat inside a cloud of smoke they couldn't escape. And here's what nobody mentions about that. They weren't only breathing wood. When you burn a plant, you don't just get ash and heat. You get whatever chemistry that plant was holding. Alkaloids, terpenes, compounds that don't just fill your lungs, they cross into your blood and reach your brain. But here's the twist nobody expects. Your brain was already waiting for them. Humans have receptors built into the nervous system that respond to certain plant compounds. Not because we evolved alongside those plants, but because those receptors regulate our own mood, memory, and pain. Which means the first time an ancestor breathed the smoke of the wrong or right burning bush, their brain didn't sit there confused. It lit up. It recognized the key. And that person, tired, cold, aching, felt better in a way they could not explain. So they did it again. They remembered which plant. They chose that fire, that spot, that bundle. In the Great Salt Lake Desert of Utah, researchers found a hearth around 12,000 years old, packed with wild tobacco seeds. Not blown in by wind, but placed. Concentrated, deliberate. 12,000 years ago, in a place with no pipes and no pottery, someone was feeding a fire a plant chosen specifically for what its smoke did to the mind. This wasn't recreation the way you'd picture it. For most of these cultures, it was sacred, smoke treated as a living messenger, carrying prayers up and visions down, used in healing and in binding one tribe to another. When something can change your mind, you don't treat it lightly. You treat it like a door, so they'd beaten the insects, beaten the infection, and learned to steer their own minds with smoke. 3 of the Dark's death sentences survived. But there's a 4th, and it's the one that never showed up on their skin at all. The one that came from inside their own heads and refused to let go. You've watched them fight the things that could kill the body. But here's the uncomfortable question underneath all of this. Why did they keep coming back to the smoke even when the insects were gone, the wound was healed, the fire was only for warmth? Because the pull wasn't about any single threat. The pull was its own thing. There's an idea that serious anthropologists take seriously called the intoxication hypothesis. It goes like this. Across nearly every human culture ever recorded, every continent, every era, groups that never once met each other, people independently found ways to alter their own consciousness. They fermented fruit, they chewed leaves, they ate strange mushrooms, and they breathed smoke. Something that universal, that stubborn, appearing over and over in populations with no contact, doesn't look like an accident. Back in the 1980s, the psychopharmacologist Ronald Siegel proposed that the drive to alter consciousness is a 4th drive, sitting right alongside hunger, thirst, and sex. Built in, not a weakness, a wiring. And it isn't even only human. Elephants seek out fermented marula fruit. Reindeer in Siberia eat psychoactive mushrooms on purpose. The hunger for an altered mind runs deeper than our species, which means this. Long before farms, before pipes, before the word for any of it, humans were choosing campsites near certain plants, burning them and breathing the result. Not to keep insects off, not to clean a wound, but because something in the skull demanded it. And they took real risks to feed it. Some of those plants make you feel like a god. Some make you feel like you're dying once and there's no second lesson. This was trial and error at fatal stakes. But the ones who survived remembered, and they didn't write it down. They lived it and passed it mouth to ear around a fire in the dark, generation after generation, for tens of thousands of years, all the way down. All the way down to you, because that 4th drive didn't disappear when the fires went out. It just changed its clothes. So look at where we've landed. That death sentence with wings. The insects, they beat it with a wall of smoke, 77,000 years ago. The infection crawling up the arm, they held it back with the right plants and their smoke, thousands of years before germs had a name. And the strange feeling the smoke put in their heads, they didn't run from it. They chased it, remembered it, and turned it into ritual. But that 4th thing, the hunger in the mind that pulled them back to the fire, even when nothing was trying to kill them, that one they never beat. Because you can't beat it. It's not a threat. It's a piece of the machinery. Right now, if you smoke, or you know someone who does, you probably think somebody invented this, that it's modern, that it's yours. It was never yours. It was theirs first, 40,000 years before you. breathed in the dark to survive a night you'll never have to face. The smoke that kept them alive and the smoke that got into their heads were the same smoke. And that reddish, heavy-lidded stare in the firelight, the one on your screen, wasn't a party. It was the oldest hunger our species ever had, catching light for the very first time. And for the first time, you might understand exactly why it's still so hard to put down. If that ancient smoke just curled its way into your head and rearranged how you look at your own habits, then subscribe and light up that bell. Because it's the closest thing you'll get to keeping this fire burning between us across the long, dark nights. Consider it your insurance policy against ever missing the next one. Now here's the ember I want you to blow on in the comments. If you could sit at that fire 40,000 years ago and take one breath of their smoke, the bug killer, the wound healer, or the god maker, which one are you trying first? And be honest, would you have stopped at just one breath